I knew something was wrong the moment my boots touched the ground that morning. My farm was normally quiet, just the hum of wind through the wheat and the distant thumping of irrigation pumps. But that day, there was a sound that didn't belong here. A deep, rolling roar, the unmistakable sound of a jet engine winding down. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. Jets didn't land anywhere near my property. The closest airport was 40 miles away. But then I saw it. A long black strip carved through the middle of my land, clean, smooth, asphalt still steaming from the morning sun. It wasn't a road. It wasn't a driveway. It wasn't anything legal. It was a runway. A full-blown private runway that hadn't existed the night before. My breath caught. My farm, my family's land for 3 generations, had been violated, cut in half by something that should take months of planning, permits, inspections, approvals, and yet here it was, built overnight like a thief in the dark. And standing proudly beside it, wearing bright orange HOA vests like they were about to direct traffic at a parking lot, were 5 people. Their leader, a woman with a tight bun and an even tighter smile, waved a clipboard in the air like she owned the place. "Oh. You must be the farmer," she said, as if I were the inconvenience here. "Don't worry, we've taken care of everything. The runway is fully compliant with HOA aviation guidelines." HOA aviation guidelines. I almost laughed. "Almost. You built this on my land," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Without permission. Without permits. Without federal clearance. Do you have any idea how illegal this is?" Her smile widened. "Actually, under Section 14B of the Meadow Creek Homeowners Association Expansion Charter, we are allowed to establish community structures that benefit neighborhood prestige." "This is not a community structure," I snapped. "This is federal infrastructure. And you have no jurisdiction here." She waved a hand dismissively. "Well, it's done now. And we already have our first jet scheduled for arrival. You can file a complaint if you like, but it won't change anything." I stared at her, and something inside me shifted. Because she had no idea. She had absolutely no clue who she was talking to. I wasn't just a farmer. This land was my piece, but my real job? I was the director of the Federal Aviation Administration. And I was about to shut their entire world down. The woman with the clipboard strutted down the edge of the runway like she was giving me a tour of my own land. Her confidence wasn't just misplaced, it was delusional. She truly believed in HOA could carve up federal airspace like it was a backyard landscaping project. And her board members followed behind her as if she were some sort of aviation pioneer instead of a suburban tyrant with a stapler. "So," she said, spinning around dramatically, "what do you think of our design? We modeled it after boutique runways used in luxury private communities. Very exclusive. Very high-end. It'll bring in a new class of residents." I stared at her. "On someone else's property." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she replied. "You farmers never use half your land anyway. Consider this a contribution to the community." "Contribution?" She really said it like that. "Who approved this?" I asked. She raised her clipboard like it was a holy artifact. The HOA voted 6-1 in favor. The lone dissenting vote was from Mr. Hanley, but he doesn't count. He's 83 and has cataracts. He probably pressed the wrong button. I felt my jaw tighten. "You understand that private runways fall under federal oversight. You cannot build them without clearance." Her expression hardened. "And you understand that this development increases property value for everyone. Including you, assuming we let you join the HOA, of course." I almost laughed again. "Join the HOA? On my own farmland?" She smirked. "You'd be surprised how zoning can change." And there it was, the threat. They weren't just trespassing. They were planning a hostile takeover of my land. The runway wasn't the problem. It was the opening move. But she still had no idea who I was. "You mentioned a jet is scheduled to land," I said calmly. "When?" "In about 2 hours," she said proudly. "A potential investor. Very wealthy. Very influential. And once he sees this runway operational, we'll finalize our expansion plans. It's all happening, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." I took a slow breath. 2 hours. 2 hours to shut them down before they turned my farm into a miniature international airport run by people who thought airspace regulations came from Pinterest. She waved her board members forward. "Show him the blueprint," she ordered. They opened a laminated poster showing their master aviation plan. It included a terminal. A terminal. On my land. That was it. They wanted war. And they'd get one. A legal, federal, unstoppable one. The moment I walked away from the HOA's little celebration crew, I pulled out my phone and opened a secure app most people didn't even know existed. It wasn't for texting. It wasn't for email. It was a direct communications channel reserved for federal-level aviation emergencies, airspace violations, unauthorized construction, and illegal aircraft activity. Exactly like this. My thumb hovered over the authentication prompt, and for a moment, I stared across my land. The runway ran like a scar through the wheat fields. The HOA board huddled together, pointing at diagrams, taking notes, imagining a future where they owned land they didn't pay for and controlled skies they didn't understand. Not today. I scanned my fingerprint. The app unlocked. A voice message auto-generated. "Director Pears, state your situation." "This is Director Marcus Pears, FAA," I said quietly. "I'm reporting an unauthorized airstrip constructed on private property without federal permits. Possible incoming aircraft scheduled to land in less than 2 hours. I'm requesting an emergency compliance team, ground stop authorization, and immediate aerial monitoring." The AI system processed the request. "Understood. Dispatching." That one word, dispatching, was all I needed. I put the phone away and headed toward my truck. Before I could take 3 steps, the HOA president herself, clipboard queen, cut me off. "Going somewhere?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. "Yep," I said. "Making a call." "That sounded like a threat," she said, crossing her arms. "You should know the HOA has a lawyer on retainer." I smirked. "Good. You'll need him." Her confidence faltered for the first time. "What did you do?" "Something you should have done before pouring asphalt," I replied. "Follow the law." She scoffed. "Our project is completely legal." "No," I said. "It's not." And in about, I checked my watch. 90 minutes, your little airport experiment is going to be shut down so hard they'll feel it from space. The color drained from her face. But she tried to recover. "You're bluffing. You're just a farmer with a loud voice." I turned and opened my truck door. "That's what you think." As I drove off, a black SUV sped past me on the dirt road, kicking up dust. Then another. And another. Government plates. Dark tinted windows. No hesitation. The compliance team had arrived. By the time I reached the ridge overlooking the farm, the SUVs had parked around the runway. Agents in jackets stepped out, speaking into radios, surveying every inch of the illegal strip. The HOA board stared in panic. War had officially begun. "Do you want to continue to Chapter 4? Panic spread across the HOA board like wildfire. The members clustered together, whispering furiously as the federal compliance agents marked the runway with bright orange flags and measured distances with laser tools. Their expressions shifted from confusion to horror as each agent scribbled on their clipboard. The HOA president hovered near them like an anxious mosquito, waving her papers and demanding explanations. "This is private land," she shouted at one agent. You can't just show up without an appointment. The agent, a stoic man named Rourke, didn't even look up. Ma'am, we go where the FAA sends us. You don't schedule federal intervention. But we're the HOA, she insisted. Rourke stopped, turned, and stared at her like she'd just told him she commanded the Navy. You built an unauthorized runway. On land you don't own. Using materials that violate 27 federal codes. And you have an unregistered aircraft planning to land in restricted airspace. You're lucky we're not arresting you. Her mouth fell open. Restricted? Restricted? This is a suburb. It's also a no-approach corridor, Rourke said. Any incoming jet is already committing a violation. She blinked rapidly. What do you mean incoming? Right on cue, the distant rumble of an approaching engine rolled across the fields. The HOA members looked up, shielding their eyes as a sleek private jet glided into view, descending slowly toward the illegal runway like a hawk on the hunt. Oh my God, muttered one board member. He's early. The agents sprang into action. Radios crackled. A perimeter formed. Emergency vehicles blocked both ends of the runway. A red flare lit up the asphalt. I walked down the hill as the chaos unfolded, the HOA president practically vibrating with rage. You, she screamed, marching toward me. You caused this. You sabotaged our project. No, I replied calmly. You sabotaged yourselves by breaking federal law. You could have talked to us. I tried, I said. You dismissed me. That was before I knew who you were, she hissed. You think being some big-shot aviation director gives you the right to humiliate us? It gives me the responsibility to protect people from reckless decisions, I said. Even yours. The jet's engines roared louder as it descended for landing. But suddenly, the pilot saw the flashing red flare and the line of government vehicles blocking the runway. The aircraft's nose lifted sharply. The engines howled. The jet aborted the landing and climbed back into the sky. The HOA board watched, mortified. Rourke approached me. Director Pears, he said. Runway declared illegal. Immediate shutdown in effect. Your call on next steps. I looked at the HOA president. This is just the beginning. The jet circled overhead, banking left, then right, clearly confused by the sudden shutdown of what it believed was a functioning private runway. The HOA president clutched her clipboard to her chest like it could shield her from the consequences. Her board members looked ready to melt into the asphalt. Meanwhile, federal agents secured the perimeter with the precision of a military operation. A voice crackled through one of the agents' radios. Aircraft requesting communication with ground authority. Pilot wants to know what's happening. Rourke looked at me. Sir, want to take it? I nodded. He handed me a portable radio. The HOA president's eyes widened as I raised it to my mouth. This is Director Marcus Pears, FAA, I said. Identify yourself. There was a pause, then a startled reply. Director Pears? This is Captain Lorne, flying Mr. Dalton's private jet. We were told to land on a newly constructed community runway. I glanced at the HOA president. Who is Dalton? I asked. She stepped forward nervously. Our investor. He's very important. Very wealthy. And he's going to be furious. I ignored her. Captain Lorne, I said into the radio, the runway is illegal. You are instructed to divert to Byron Regional. I repeat, divert immediately. Understood, the pilot replied, sounding shaken. The jet angled upward, engines roaring as it headed toward a legal airport. The moment it disappeared over the hills, the HOA president's thin composure snapped. Do you have any idea who you just offended? She shouted. Dalton is the reason we started this expansion. He's ready to invest millions. And now he thinks we're incompetent. That's because you are, I said. You sold him something you had no right to build. You ruined everything, she said, pointing at me as if she wished she could stab me with her clipboard. You could have worked with us. I did, I said. Just not on your fantasy airport. Her face reddened. You don't understand. Dalton was going to help us develop a luxury aviation community, hangars, terminals, even a flight club. We were going to put this neighborhood on the map. And you thought cutting through my land was the way to do it? She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had committed to a dream so blinding that she convinced herself the law no longer applied. Rourke approached. Director, the team is ready for the next phase. We need your directive. The HOA board froze. What's the next phase? One of them asked nervously. I looked at them, letting the silence stretch like a drawn bowstring. Accountability. Their faces drained of color. Accountability. The word hit the HOA board like a gust of icy wind. Their shoulders stiffened, their expressions tightened, and a few of them looked like they were seriously considering sprinting into the fields. But there was no escaping what came next. Rourke held a stack of official documents, forms, notices, violation records, all clipped together with the kind of precision only federal agents possessed. He handed them to me, and I turned to face the board. You built federal infrastructure without permission, I said calmly. That alone is a felony. But that's not the only issue. The HOA president swallowed hard. What else? You trespassed, I continued. You illegally altered private property. You endangered airspace operations. You attempted to direct an aircraft toward an unapproved landing zone. You obstructed FAA procedures. And you lied to an investor about having authorization. Her lips trembled, but she held her chin high. We didn't lie. We just believed it would be approved. I shook my head. Belief isn't clearance. And you knew it? Rourke began distributing violation notices to each board member. The bright yellow papers stood out against their shaking hands. What does this mean? One of them asked, voice cracking. It means, Rourke said dryly, you're being cited for multiple federal violations. You'll be summoned for hearings. Your HOA will be subject to an in-depth audit. And the cost of removing this runway falls entirely on your organization. The president's jaw dropped. Removing? You're demolishing it? No, I corrected. You are. One board member nearly fainted. Another rubbed his temples like he was seconds away from crying. The president, however, stepped forward, gripping her clipboard like a lifeline. You can't do this, she snapped. We are a registered homeowners association. We have rights. We have influence. You have neither in federal airspace, I said. And you crossed the line the moment you brought aviation into your fantasy development plans. This is unfair, she hissed. You're abusing your power. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I simply spoke the truth. I didn't build a runway on someone else's land in the middle of the night, I said. You did. And now you're facing the consequences. Rourke approached again. Director, local authorities have been notified. They'll arrive shortly to take statements. The HOA president went pale. Police too? Of course, Rourke said. This involves property violations. She staggered back, finally realizing the gravity of everything she'd done. I watched her crumble, not out of satisfaction, but out of necessity. People like her only understood reality when it hit like a sledgehammer. And this, I said quietly, is only step one. Her eyes widened in fear. The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. The HOA board members tensed like a pack of raccoons hearing a garbage truck approach. The president stiffened, clutching her clipboard so tightly I thought the plastic might crack. Local law enforcement vehicles rolled onto the property, lights flashing. 2 patrol cars. 1 unmarked sedan. And another SUV belonging to the county sheriff's office. They stopped near the federal agents, and officers stepped out, taking in the chaotic scene, the illegal runway, the orange flags, the terrified HOA board, and the team of FAA operatives documenting everything. Sheriff Daniels, a broad-shouldered man with a calm but commanding presence, stepped forward. "Director Pears," he greeted with a nod. "Heard you've got quite a mess." "That's putting it lightly," I said. Rourke handed the sheriff a folder. "Multiple violations. FAA jurisdiction, but property damage and trespassing fall under county law." The sheriff flipped through the paperwork, his eyebrows rising higher with each page. When he finished, he turned to the HOA president. "Ma'am, I think we need to talk." She forced a shaky smile. "Sheriff, this is all a big misunderstanding. We were trying to improve the community. By building a runway on someone else's land," he cut in. "Without permits? Without consent? And directing an incoming aircraft here." She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. We had an investor. We thought." "You thought wrong," the sheriff said flatly. One of the board members spoke up, voice trembling. Are we being arrested?" The sheriff shook his head. "Not today. But you will all be formally questioned, and charges are definitely on the table. For now, you stay put." The president bristled. "You can't keep us here." "Yes, I can," he replied. "This is an active investigation." She spun toward me, eyes blazing. "This is your fault. You just love flexing your authority. You could have handled this privately, quietly." "You built a runway," I said. "There is no quiet version of this. You're destroying everything we planned. You destroyed it yourself by ignoring every law in place." She let out a frustrated scream and threw her clipboard onto the asphalt. It clattered across the surface, a tiny, pathetic sound compared to the roar of the jet earlier. The sheriff gestured to his deputies. "Start taking statements." As they began questioning the board, I stepped back, giving the agents space to finish their assessment. The sun hung high overhead, casting long shadows across the illegal strip of asphalt. And then Rourke approached me again. "Director," he said calmly. "We found something you need to see." His tone wasn't urgent. It was worse. It was serious. Rourke led me toward the far end of the runway, past the flustered HOA members still under questioning, past the sheriff's deputies taking notes. The sun gleamed off the black asphalt, making it look almost beautiful, a cruel contrast to the disaster it represented. He stopped beside a small patch of disturbed ground near the edge of the runway. "What is it?" I asked. Rourke crouched and pointed. "Someone's buried something here recently. Right beneath the asphalt." I squinted. At first, it looked like nothing, just a slight unevenness in the ground. But then I realized the HOA had left a corner of their secret runway imperfectly leveled. A little crack, a tiny indentation, a telltale sign. "What do you mean, something buried?" I asked. "Could be anything," Rourke said. "But we need to check it before the investigation concludes." I knelt and ran my hand over the asphalt. My fingers caught a small metal edge barely visible. Using a tool from one of the agents, we pried it open. Beneath the surface lay a box. Not just any box. A locked, reinforced container. I exchanged a glance with Rourke. "Do you think this is?" "We won't know until it's opened," he said. I gestured to the sheriff, and they carefully extracted the box. Dust and small stones fell away. The HOA board, who had been eavesdropping from a safe distance, gasped audibly. The HOA president paled. What is that?" Rourke handed me a crowbar. I pried the box open slowly, deliberately, savoring the way the tension built. Inside, papers, blueprints, several contracts, and a small, encrypted drive. I frowned. Looks like they weren't just building a runway. They were planning a full-scale aviation development, with investors, permits, and without authorization a private air traffic system. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. This is bigger than we thought. And, I added, they had no idea I had the authority to stop it before any planes landed. They thought they were clever. They weren't. The HOA president's face turned ghostly. You have all of this power, and you didn't even tell us. I didn't need to, I said. You exposed yourselves. You created the runway. You contacted the investor. You violated the law. I simply let reality catch up to you. Her knees trembled. We could have, handled this ourselves. You could have, I said, standing, but you didn't. That's the lesson. The sheriff nodded. Director, this will make the paperwork easier. With these documents, we can fully dismantle their illegal operations and prevent future violations. I looked at the runway, the black scar across my fields, and felt a strange satisfaction. Justice wasn't just a word today, it was a tangible force, resting in my hands and in the law. And one more thing, I said quietly. Any aircraft thinking about landing here in the future will have a very hard lesson waiting for them. The HOA president sat on the edge of her now-defunct runway, cradling her clipboard like it was a lifeline. The other board members were scattered across the field, some pacing nervously, others slumped in defeat. The sheriff's deputies and FAA agents were finishing their final documentation, taking photographs, measuring the damaged areas, and marking spots for legal removal. I stood at the top of the hill overlooking my property, arms crossed, and watched as the chaos slowly transformed into order. The illegal runway, their symbol of ambition and arrogance, would be torn up, removed, and documented properly. My farm, scarred but still mine, would survive. And more importantly, the lesson they learned today would resonate far beyond the borders of this small community. Sheriff Daniels approached. Director Pearce, everything's under control. We've confiscated their documents, secured the encrypted drives, and the HOA board will face both local and federal hearings. The runway is scheduled for demolition first thing tomorrow. I nodded. Good. Make sure it's thorough. No shortcuts. The HOA president suddenly stood and called out, voice shaky but defiant. This isn't over. You may have stopped us now, but we'll find another way. Another investor, another plan. I raised a hand, cutting her off. No. The FAA regulates airspace for everyone's safety, not your ambitions. Your runway was illegal. Your plans endangered lives. And you forgot one critical detail, I run the FAA. You won't be doing this anywhere else. The board members exchanged guilty glances. Even the ones who had been most vocal about their dreams of flying private jets over my fields now seemed small, humbled. The weight of federal authority, combined with the reality of legal consequences, had finally settled on them. Rourke came up behind me. Director, the investors have been contacted. They were unaware of the illegal construction and have backed out entirely. I allowed myself a brief smile. Perfect. The problem isn't just stopped, it's prevented from spreading. The HOA president sank to the ground, defeated. We thought we could do it because no one would catch us, because we thought no one would care. I shook my head. The law always catches up to those who ignore it. You learn the hard way. Let this be a lesson not just to you, but to anyone who thinks they can bend rules for personal gain. The wind swept across the fields, ruffling the wheat and carrying away the echoes of engines and chaos. My farm was mine again, quiet, peaceful, and untouched by ambition's recklessness. I took one last look at the black asphalt scar before the agents began tearing it up. A symbol of arrogance destroyed. Justice served. And a clear message sent. Some lessons aren't taught softly, they're carved into the ground, enforced with authority, and backed by law. Today, everyone involved learned that lesson. And thanks to a little foresight, a lot of patience, and federal power, my farm and my skies would remain safe. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. The farm was quiet once more. The only sound left was the wind, and finally, it felt like mine again.